The ship smelled like rot and metal. Yuna sat with her back against the cold wall of the cargo hold, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes half closed. Around her, 14 other humans sat in the dark. Some of them were crying. Some had stopped crying days ago, and now just stared at nothing. The hold was never meant for people. It was built for grain and dry cargo. There were no seats, no beds, no toilet. Just a metal floor and the low hum of an engine somewhere beneath them. Tejo sat next to her. He was thin, with sharp eyes and oil-stained hands. Back on the colony, he had been an engineer. He had built water systems and repaired generators, and once fixed a broken radio with nothing but wire and tape. Now he sat in a cage on an alien ship and counted the bolts on the ceiling, because it was the only thing keeping his mind from falling apart. Across from them, Jisoo pressed a torn piece of cloth against a cut on a young man's forehead. She worked gently, the way she always did. She had been a medic at the colony hospital. She had soft hands and a sharp tongue, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like everything would be fine, even when it clearly was not. And in the far corner, Pilsu sat alone. He was the oldest of them, a quiet man with gray in his hair and scars on his arms that he never talked about. He had been a soldier once, a long time ago, back on Earth. He did not cry. He did not stare. He watched. 3 days ago, the Hesk had come. They came from the sky in ships that blocked the sun, and they took what they wanted. The colony on Eridu 4 had no military, no weapons, no defense grid. It was a farming settlement. 200 people, growing rice and soybeans on a planet that smelled like wet earth after rain. The Hesk did not negotiate. They did not ask. They landed, rounded up the strongest-looking humans, and loaded them into the cargo hold like sacks of grain. Because that is what humans were to the rest of the galaxy. Soft, weak, breakable. The Galactic Threat Index listed humanity as Category 9, which was the lowest possible rating. It meant minimal threat. It meant that a human was considered less dangerous than a common house pet on most civilized worlds. No claws, no venom, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind, just thin skin over thin bones, and a brain that was, according to most alien scientists, unremarkable. The Hess guard who walked through the cargo hold every few hours seemed to agree. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with dark green scales and a jaw that could bite through steel cable. He carried a shock rod on his belt, and he liked to use it. Not because the humans were causing trouble, just because he could. On the second day, the guard stopped in front of Yuna. He looked down at her, the way a child looks at a bug. Then he reached down and grabbed her arm. He squeezed. Yuna did not move. She did not make a sound. The guard laughed. He said something in his own language to another guard standing by the door. The other guard laughed too. Yuna did not understand the words, but Tejo did. He had spent years studying alien languages from intercepted signals back on the colony. He leaned close to Yuna after the guard walked away and whispered, "He said your bones feel hollow, like a bird." Yuna said nothing, but Tejo noticed something. Her eyes had followed the guard as he walked away. Not with fear, not with anger, with focus. She was looking at the gaps in his armor, the place where the neck scales were thinner. The way his knee bent slightly inward when he turned. She was studying him. Tejo had known Yuna for 2 years on the colony. She worked in the fields during the day and kept to herself at night. She was small, 5'3", maybe 110 pounds. She had short black hair and a calm face, and scars on her knuckles that she said were from farming equipment. Tejo never believed that. He had seen the way she moved, the way she balanced her weight, the way her eyes tracked movement. That was not a farmer. That was something else. He never asked. She never told. But now, sitting in the belly of a slaver's ship, heading toward whatever hell waited for them, he was glad she was here. On the third day, Pilsu gathered the group together. He spoke quietly, so the guards outside could not hear. He looked at each of them, one by one, and then he said, "They do not know what we are. Let them keep not knowing." Nobody asked what he meant. They all understood. The ship arrived at the pit station on the fourth day. Yuna saw it through a crack in the cargo hold wall. A ring-shaped structure, the size of a small moon, spinning slowly in orbit around a dead gray planet. Lights blinked across its surface like a city at night. Ships moved in and out of its docking ports like insects around a hive. The pit station was the center of the Hesk Dominion's blood sport industry. It was where fighters from across the galaxy came to kill each other for money, for fame, for survival. The arena at its core could hold 200,000 spectators. Billions more watched from across the galaxy through broadcast networks. It was the most watched entertainment in the known universe. And the humans were not here to fight. They were here to die. Dovin, the warlord who ran the pit circuit, had purchased them on a whim. He was a massive reptilian creature with golden eyes and a voice like gravel dragging across stone. He stood on the docking platform as the humans were let out in chains, and looked at them the way a man looks at a menu. He pointed to a few, nodded at others, and waved the rest away. He told his advisor that the humans would be used in the warm-up rounds, quick deaths before the real fights, something to get the crowd excited. The humans were taken to the lowest level of the fighter housing, a cold, damp section of the station that smelled like blood and disinfectant. They were given a single room with bare metal bunks and a water tap that worked half the time. Above them, through the ceiling, they could hear the roar of the crowd as the night's fights began. Yuna stood at the edge of the pit entrance, looking down through the gate at the arena floor far below. It was stained dark with old blood. The sand was packed hard from years of bodies falling on it. The lights above were blinding white, designed to make sure the audience could see every detail of every wound. Tejo came up behind her. He stood there for a moment, looking at the same thing she was looking at. Then he asked, quietly, "How many can you take?" Yuna did not turn around. Her eyes stayed on the arena. The lights reflected in them like small white fires. "How many do they send?" she said. And somewhere far above them, the crowd roared for blood, not knowing that the blood they would soon be seeing would not be human. They gave her no weapon. They gave her no armor. They gave her a pair of thin cloth pants and a sleeveless shirt, and pushed her through the gate into the arena like a lamb into a slaughterhouse. The crowd above barely noticed. Most of them were still finding their seats, buying drinks, placing bets on the main event later that night. The warm-up rounds were nothing. Filler, a bit of easy blood to set the mood. Yuna's first opponent was a Brel. It was an amphibian creature with wet blue skin, 4 muscular arms, and a mouth full of teeth that curved inward like fishhooks. It stood nearly 7 feet tall and weighed at least 300 pounds. When it saw Yuna walk out onto the sand, it made a sound that might have been a laugh. The crowd made the same sound. On the betting screens above the arena, the odds were not about whether Yuna would win or lose. They were about how many seconds she would last. The most popular bet was under 10. The bell rang. The Brel charged. It was fast for its size, crossing the arena floor in 3 huge steps, all 4 arms reaching for her. Yuna did not run. She did not freeze. She moved to the left, just slightly, just enough, and the Brel's closest arm missed her by inches. She was already inside its reach before it understood what had happened. She drove her elbow into the soft tissue under its lowest arm. The Brel grunted and swung at her with its upper arms. She ducked, dropped low, and stomped on the side of its knee with everything she had. The joint bent the wrong way with a sound like a thick branch snapping. The Brel screamed and fell to one knee. Yuna was on its back before it hit the ground. She wrapped her arm around its thick neck, locked her legs around its torso, and squeezed. The Brel thrashed. It reached back with all four arms, clawing at her, tearing her shirt, cutting her skin. Yuna did not let go. She squeezed harder. She squeezed until the Brel's movements slowed, then stopped, then went limp. She held on for 5 more seconds to be sure, then released and dropped to the sand. The arena was silent, not the dramatic silence of a shocked crowd. The confused silence of people who did not understand what they had just seen. The warm-up act had won. The thing that was supposed to die in 10 seconds was standing in the middle of the ring, breathing hard, bleeding from shallow cuts on her arms and back, but standing. Dovin watched from his balcony. He tilted his head and said to his advisor, "A fluke." His advisor agreed. It had to be. That night, Jisoo cleaned and stitched Yuna's wounds in the dim light of their cell. 2 cracked ribs, a torn muscle in her left shoulder, deep scratches across her back. Jisoo worked in silence for a long time. Then she stopped, needle in hand, and looked at Yuna's face. Yuna's expression had not changed since she walked out of the arena. Calm, empty, focused. "You cannot keep doing this," Jisoo said. "Your body is not made for this. You are falling apart." Yuna looked at her. There was something old in her eyes, something that had been there long before the Hess came, long before the colony. "I have been falling apart since I was 12, she said. "I am still here." Jisoo did not ask what she meant. She finished the stitches in silence. In the maintenance tunnels below the arena, Taeho worked. He had found a service hatch on the second night, and had been exploring ever since, mapping the station's layout on a scrap of metal with a sharp stone. He collected things: a broken carbon plate from a ventilation cover, strips of flexible alloy from a discarded pipe, wire, bolts, scraps that no one wanted and no one missed. At night, while the others slept, he sat in the corner and built. He was making forearm guards for Yuna, light, strong, and shaped to deflect a blow without slowing her down. The second fight came the next day. A Gorvan, a creature made of what looked like living stone, with a body like a boulder and fists like wrecking balls. It moved slowly, but hit with the force of a collapsing building. One clean hit would kill Yuna. Everyone in the arena knew it. The odds were worse this time. Under 5 seconds. The bell rang. The Gorvan swung. Yuna moved. It swung again. She moved again. She kept moving. She did not attack. She circled, ducked, sidestepped, rolled. The crowd grew restless. The Gorvan grew frustrated. It swung harder, faster, wilder. It missed every time. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. The Gorvan was breathing hard. Its swings were slower now. Its feet dragged on the sand. And Yuna was still moving, still circling, still watching with those calm, focused eyes. The aliens in the crowd did not understand. Their fighters were built for power, for speed, for killing in the first 30 seconds. They did not understand what endurance meant. They did not know that the human body was designed by millions of years of evolution to do one thing better than almost any creature in the galaxy: keep going. When the Gorvan stumbled, Yuna struck. She closed the distance in a heartbeat, drove her reinforced forearm into its throat, felt something crack beneath the stone-like skin, and hit it again and again and again, until the Gorvan fell and did not get up. This time, the silence lasted longer. The third fight was different. Dovan wanted a show. He wanted the crowd to see the human broken, so he changed the rules. 2 opponents at once. And for extra entertainment, he ordered his guards to drag Pilsu into the arena as well. An unarmed old man, thrown onto the sand like bait. The 2 alien fighters, a pair of lean predator-type creatures with hooked claws and long teeth, circled Pilsu, like wolves, around a wounded deer. Yuna saw Pilsu through the gate before it opened. She saw him standing alone on the sand, unarmed, his back straight, and his hands at his sides. He did not look afraid. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Something broke inside Yuna. Not her bones, not her will. Something deeper. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. The gate opened. The announcer began the countdown. Yuna did not wait for the bell. She ran. She crossed the arena floor faster than anyone thought a human could move, and hit the first fighter from the side like a hammer. She targeted its throat, its eyes, its joints. She broke things. She tore things. The creature was dead in under 10 seconds, its neck twisted at an angle that should not exist. It looked at the small human woman standing over its partner's body, covered in blood, breathing like a machine, her eyes wide and white and burning. It had been bred for killing. It had killed dozens of opponents in this arena. And for the first time in its life, it was afraid. Yuna did not give it time to run. She finished it quickly and then dropped to her knees beside Pilsu, who had fallen during the chaos. She lifted him in her arms. He was lighter than she expected. His breathing was shallow and wet. Pilsu died that night in the cell, with Jisoo holding his hand and Taeho standing by the door so the guards would not come in. His injuries were too deep, too much damage inside. Jisoo tried everything she knew, but some things cannot be fixed with torn cloth and steady hands. Yuna sat alone in the far corner of the cell. She was still covered in blood. Some of it was hers. Most of it was not. She stared at the wall and said nothing for a long time. Then Taeho came and sat beside her. He did not speak. He just sat there, the way he always did, steady and quiet and present. After a long time, Yuna said, "I want the champion." Taeho looked at her. He saw the thing in her eyes that had been unlocked, the thing that could not be put back. He nodded once. Far above them, in his private viewing room, Dovin watched the replay of the third fight on a floating screen. His advisor stood behind him, pale and nervous. "She is becoming a problem," the advisor said. Dovin leaned forward and watched the moment Yuna crossed the arena. He watched it again and again. Then he smiled, slowly, the way a predator smiles when it sees an opportunity. "No," Dovin said. "She is becoming a product." Dovan gave her a name. Not her real name, a brand. He called her the Fragile. He had posters made, holographic projections that floated above the station's main corridors, showing a small human woman standing in a pool of blood, her fists raised, her eyes empty. Below the image, in the sharp, angular script of the Hesk language, it read, "How long can glass last?" The crowd loved it. They loved the idea of it. A tiny, breakable thing thrown against the worst the galaxy had to offer. It was not sport to them. It was comedy. A joke that kept delivering a punchline no one expected. Yuna did not care about the name. She did not care about the posters, or the crowds, or the billions watching from across the galaxy. She cared about one thing: getting to the champion. Everything else was just a door she had to walk through to get there. Dovin had moved her out of the warm-up rounds and into the ranked circuit, where real fighters competed for position and prize money. The opponents were harder, smarter, more dangerous. A venomous insectoid with barbed tails that could paralyze on contact. A cybernetically enhanced ape-like creature with metal bones and targeting implants in its eyes. A blind predator that hunted by sound and could strike from any direction in total darkness. Yuna fought them all. She won. Not easily, not cleanly. Every fight left her with new damage. Broken fingers, a fractured cheekbone, deep puncture wounds in her left leg from the venomous fighter's tail that swelled purple and black and took weeks to heal. After each fight, Jisoo would meet her at the gate and guide her back to the cell, swearing under her breath, hands already reaching for bandages and antiseptic made from stolen cleaning chemicals. But the damage was adding up. Jisoo could see it, even if Yuna refused to admit it. The body has limits. Human endurance is extraordinary, almost supernatural, compared to most species in the galaxy. But it is not infinite. Bones that break too many times stop healing straight. Scar tissue builds on scar tissue, until the muscles beneath can barely move. Jisoo sat with Yuna one night, after a particularly brutal fight, and told her the truth. "Maybe 10 more fights," she said. "After that, something will break that I cannot fix. Your spine, your skull, something that matters, and then it is over." Yuna looked at her and said, "Then I need to make the next 10 count." Taeho worked harder than any of them. He slept 2 hours a night and spent the rest in the maintenance tunnels, scavenging, building, planning. He had found a way into the station's medical archive, a poorly secured database that contained detailed biological profiles of every species that had ever fought in the pit. He studied them all. Every opponent Yuna would face, he mapped in advance. Nerve clusters that could be struck to cause temporary paralysis, breathing gaps in exoskeletons that could be targeted, joints that bent in ways the creatures themselves did not fully understand. He built Yuna better gear, lightweight armor plates sewn into a fitted vest, reinforced hand wraps with thin carbon strips along the knuckles, and his masterpiece, a collapsible blade 4 inches long, hidden inside a wrist guard, designed to extend with a flick of the arm. It was made from a broken surgical instrument he found in a waste chute, and sharpened against the floor of the maintenance tunnel, until it could cut through leather without pressure. He gave it to Yuna before her 8th fight. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at him. "Thank you," she said. It was the first time she had said those words since they were taken. The fights continued. Yuna climbed the ranks. The fragile was no longer a joke. She was still the underdog in every match, but the odds were narrowing. People were starting to bet on her. Not many, but some. And the ones who did were winning a lot of money. Word spread beyond the pit station. Other species on other worlds began watching the broadcasts. An alien anthropologist from the Valith Accord, a neutral diplomatic coalition that studied civilizations across the galaxy, visited the station as part of a research delegation. Her name was difficult to pronounce in any human language, so the translation system simply called her the Observer. She sat in the stands and watched Yuna fight a creature 3 times her size. She watched the human take a blow that cracked 2 of her ribs and get back up. She watched the human take another blow that split the skin above her eye open and get back up. She watched the human keep fighting with blood running down her face and one arm hanging wrong at her side. And she watched the human win. The Observer went back to her ship that night and wrote in her report, "The human does not fight like prey. She fights like something that decided, a long time ago, that dying was not an option. I recommend the Galactic Threat Index be reviewed. We may have made a serious error." Nobody read the report. Not yet. The champion noticed. Golrak. 9 feet of black kitten armor, with bladed arms that could cut through bulkhead steel, and mandibles that had crushed the skulls of over 200 opponents. He was the pit circuit's greatest fighter, undefeated in 400 bouts. He had not spoken to another fighter in years. He did not need to. His record spoke for itself. But one night, after Yuna's 12th fight, Golrak walked down to the tunnel entrance that overlooked the arena floor. He stood in the shadows and watched as Yuna finished her opponent, a heavily armored reptilian that had been favored to win by 60-1 odds. She stood over its broken body, breathing hard, her hands shaking, blood dripping from her knuckles onto the sand. She was small and damaged and barely standing. Golrak tilted his massive head. His compound eyes reflected the arena lights in 1,000 tiny points. He watched her for a long time. Then he spoke. One word. The first word anyone had heard him say in years. Interesting. The next morning, Dovan made the announcement. The main event. The biggest fight in pit circuit history. The Fragile versus the Ender. Yuna versus Galrak. The human versus the undefeated champion. It would take place in the Grand Pit, a largest arena on the station, in 2 weeks. Every seat was sold within an hour. Every broadcast network in the galaxy secured viewing rights. The betting markets exploded. The odds were 200 to 1 against Yuna. Tejo spent the next 13 days preparing. He pulled every piece of data he could find on Galrak. He watched recordings of every fight. He mapped the champion's body joint by joint, plate by plate. Galrak's exoskeleton was nearly impenetrable. His reflexes were faster than anything Yuna had faced. His bladed arms could strike with enough force to cut a ground vehicle in half. He had no weaknesses, except one. Tejo found it on the 11th day, buried in a medical scan from 6 years ago. When Galrak lunged, when he committed his full body to a forward strike, the plates of his thorax shifted apart for just a fraction of a second. Between them, there was a membrane, soft tissue, unarmored. It was exposed for less than half a second, and only during a full lunge. No fighter had ever been fast enough or close enough to reach it. Tejo showed Yuna the scan. He showed her the gap. He showed her the timing. She studied it until she could see it with her eyes closed. The night before the fight, Jisoo came to Yuna's cell. She did not bring bandages. She did not bring medicine. She just sat next to Yuna on the cold metal bunk and put her arms around her. Yuna was stiff at first. Then she was not. They stayed like that for a long time. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say that mattered. After Jisoo left, Yuna sat alone. She shadowboxed in the small space, throwing combinations at the air, her fists cutting through the silence. Then she stopped. She looked at her hands. They were bruised and scarred and swollen. The hands of a farmer, the Hesk would say. The hands of something fragile. She closed her fists and whispered into the dark. Pilsu, I will make them remember. The Grand Pit was full. Every seat, every standing area, every balcony and observation deck was packed with bodies. 200,000 aliens pressed together in a ring of noise and heat and light, their voices merging into a single roar that shook the walls and hummed through the floor like an earthquake that would not stop. Above the arena, massive holographic screens floated in the air, showing replays of Galrak's greatest kills on a loop. Below them, smaller screens showed Yuna's face, the promotional image Dovan had chosen, a close-up of her eyes, bruised and calm, with the words "The Fragile" written across the bottom in glowing red text. Beyond the station, billions watched, on Hesk warships and trade outposts, in the viewing halls of the Velith Accord, on pirate frequencies in the outer systems, in a dozen human slave camps scattered across Hesk territory, where guards had set up screens so their captives could watch the little human woman die in high definition. Everyone in the known galaxy was watching. It was the most anticipated fight in the history of the pit circuit. Not because anyone thought Yuna could win, but because everyone wanted to see how she would lose. Dovan sat in his private box above the arena, surrounded by his advisors and guests. He wore his ceremonial armor, gold-plated and polished, the armor of a warlord attending a celebration. He held a drink in one hand, and smiled the way he always smiled, wide and slow, showing every tooth. This was his moment, his product, his show. Deep below the arena, in the fighter's tunnel, Yuna stood still. Tejo was beside her, adjusting the straps on her armor. the lightweight vest he had built from stolen scraps, the reinforced forearm guards, the wrist guard with the hidden blade. His hands were steady. They were always steady. But his jaw was tight, and his eyes were wet. And when he finished the last strap, he did not step back. He stood there, close enough that only she could hear him. "The membrane," he said, "half a second. When he lunges, you will only get one chance." Yuna nodded. "If you miss it," he said, and then stopped. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Yuna looked at him. For a moment, just one moment, her face changed. The calm mask cracked, and underneath it was something raw and tired and human. She put her hand on his shoulder and squeezed once. Then the mask came back. She turned toward the gate. The gate opened, the tunnel filled with light and sound. Yuna walked out onto the sand. The crowd erupted. Half of them cheered not for her, but for the spectacle. Half of them laughed. She was so small, under the blinding white lights of the grand pit, surrounded by 200,000 screaming aliens. She looked like a child who had wandered onto a battlefield by accident. She walked to the center of the arena and stood there, her arms at her sides, her head slightly down, her breathing slow and controlled. The sand beneath her feet was hard and dark. Generations of blood had soaked into it until it was almost black. The opposite gate opened. The sound that came from the crowd was different now, deeper, more primal, a sound of worship. Golrak stepped into the light. He was enormous, 9 feet of layered black chitin that gleamed like wet obsidian under the arena lights. His body was built for destruction. Broad armored shoulders, a thick thorax plated like a tank, and 2 primary arms that ended in natural blades, curved and sharp, and long enough to cut a person in half from shoulder to hip. His legs were thick as pillars. His head was a nightmare of compound eyes and mandibles that clicked and shifted as he moved. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, each step shaking the sand. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the screens. He looked at Yuna. The arena fell into a strange, electric hush. The announcer's voice boomed from speakers embedded in the walls. He spoke in the formal Hesk language, the traditional words that preceded every championship fight. He named the fighters. He listed their records. Golrak, 400 victories, 0 defeats. Yuna, 15 victories, 0 defeats. The crowd laughed at the comparison. 15 against 400, glass against iron. The announcer began the final countdown. 10 seconds of ceremonial silence before the bell. It was tradition, a moment of respect between warriors. Both fighters were expected to stand still, to honor the ritual, to wait. Golrak stood still. His bladed arms hung at his sides. His compound eyes locked on the small creature in front of him. He was calm. He was always calm. He had done this 400 times. He knew how it ended. 9 seconds. 8 seconds. 7. Yuna moved. She did not ease forward. She did not test the distance. She exploded off the sand, like something launched from a cannon. Her body low, her legs driving, her eyes locked on the center of Golrak's chest. The crowd gasped. The announcer's voice cut off mid-word. Dovin sat forward in his seat. In the fighter's tunnel below, Teho gripped the metal railing so hard his knuckles turned white. Golrak reacted on instinct. He was fast, impossibly fast for something his size. His right blade arm swept down in a killing arc, aimed at the space where Yuna's head was a fraction of a second ago. But she was already gone. She had dropped into a slide, her body flat against the sand, passing under his arm and between his legs in one fluid motion. She came up behind him, spun, and was on his back before he could turn. Golrak twisted, reaching back with both bladed arms. His blades were designed for distance, for sweeping cuts, not for targets clinging to his own body. He grabbed at her with his secondary arms, shorter limbs that ended in clawed hands, and caught her leg. He squeezed. Something cracked. Yuna felt the pain shoot through her like electricity, white-hot and blinding. She did not let go. Golrak threw himself backward, slamming his body into the arena wall. The impact crushed Yuna between his armored back and the stone. She felt ribs break. She felt the air leave her lungs. The world went gray at the edges. The crowd screamed. She did not let go. Golrak lunged forward, away from the wall, trying to shake her off. And there it was, the lunge, the full-body forward motion that Tejo had shown her 1,000 times on the stolen medical scan. The thorax plates shifted. The membrane appeared. A strip of soft, pale tissue between the black armor plates, no wider than 3 fingers, exposed for less than half a second. Yuna's arm moved. The hidden blade extended from her wrist guard with a sharp click. She drove it into the membrane with every ounce of strength she had left. The blade sank in up to the guard. Golrak made a sound, a high, sharp, terrible sound that no one in the arena had ever heard him make. A sound of surprise, a sound of pain. Yuna did not stop. She grabbed the edge of the split carapace with her free hand. She got her other hand on the opposite edge. She pulled. She pulled with her arms, her back, her legs, her broken ribs, her cracked bones, her torn muscles, her everything. She pulled with the memory of Pilsu dying in a cell. She pulled with the image of 14 humans sitting in a cargo hold built for grain. She pulled with every year of every fight she had ever fought. On Earth, on the colony, in this arena, in the dark. The carapace split. It tore open along the wound she had made, spreading upward through the thorax, through the chest, through the neck. Chitin cracked and separated. Fluid burst from the opening in a hot wave. Golrak's body shuddered once, violently, and then divided. 2 halves. They fell away from each other and crashed to the sand on either side of Yuna, with a sound like 2 buildings collapsing. The bell rang. It rang after. The fight was over before it officially began. Yuna stood in the space between the 2 halves of the galaxy's greatest champion. She was drenched in fluid. Her left leg was broken. Her ribs were shattered. Blood ran from her nose and her ears and a dozen wounds across her body. She was barely standing, but she was standing. The silence lasted 11 seconds. 200,000 aliens, and not one of them breathed. Then Yuna turned. She looked up at Dovin's box, high above the arena. She raised her hand, dripping with the champion's blood, and pointed directly at the warlord's face. Her voice was rough and broken, but the arena's microphones caught every word and broadcast them to every screen, every speaker, every world that was watching. "We are not fragile," she said. "You just never gave us a reason to show you what we are." Below the arena, in the holding cells, the other humans heard her voice through the walls. They looked at each other. Something passed between them, something old and electric and unstoppable. And then they screamed. Not in fear, not in pain, in something the Hesk had never heard from a human before. A war cry. In his box, Dovin's smile was gone. His drink had fallen from his hand. His advisor leaned close and whispered, "What do we do?" Dovin stared at the arena floor, at the broken champion, at the small blood-soaked human standing in the middle of it all. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. The footage spread like fire through dry grass. Within 1 hour, every major broadcast network in the galaxy had the clip. Within 3 hours, it was the most watched recording in the history of the Galactic Network. Every species, on every world, on every station and ship and outpost, saw the same thing. a small human woman ripping the undefeated champion of the pit circuit in half with her bare hands before the bell even rang. They watched it and they did not understand it. They watched it again and they understood it even less. They had been told that humans were fragile, Category 9, minimal threat, and now they were watching one tear open the most dangerous fighter in known space like he was made of paper. On the pit station, the footage played on every screen in every corridor. The aliens who lived and worked on the station walked past the screens and stopped. They looked over their shoulders at the human slaves they passed in the halls every day, the ones who cleaned the floors and carried the cargo and never met anyone's eyes. They looked at them differently now. For the first time, they looked at them with something that might have been fear. And in the lowest level of the station, in the cells and holding rooms where the human slaves were kept, something was happening. Something that Tejo had been building toward for weeks. While Yuna had been fighting in the arena, Tejo had been fighting a quieter war. He had mapped the entire station. He knew every corridor, every junction, every ventilation shaft, every weakness in the structure. He had stolen communication devices from maintenance lockers. He had built simple weapons from scrap metal and broken tools. He had talked to every human on the station, one by one, quietly, carefully, and he had told them the same thing. When the time comes, be ready. The time came the night of Galrak's death. It started in the lower levels. A group of human workers in the waste processing plant overpowered their 2 guards, using nothing but a length of pipe and the element of surprise. They took the guards' shock rods and moved to the next section. Another group in the kitchen storage area broke free using knives they had hidden over the course of weeks. In the engineering bay, 3 humans who had been assigned to repair work used their knowledge of the station's electrical systems to shut down the lights in an entire wing. The HES guards responded, but slowly. They were not prepared for this. The station's security was designed to contain slaves who were afraid, not slaves who had just watched one of their own kill a god. The guards moved in standard formation, heavy and loud, expecting the humans to scatter and hide like they always did. The humans did not scatter. They fought the way Yuna fought. Not with brute strength, not with size or armor or natural weapons. They fought with speed and coordination, and a kind of furious creativity that the HESC had never seen. They attacked in small groups, hitting weak points, retreating before the guards could organize, and hitting again from a different direction. They targeted communications first, then lighting, then life support controls. Tejo directed it all, from a maintenance hub he had turned into a command center, using stolen communicators to coordinate the groups like pieces on a board. Dovan received the reports in his command center and did not believe them at first. Humans were revolting. His humans, the fragile, soft, harmless creatures he had bought for entertainment, were tearing through his station, level by level. He ordered his elite guards to crush the uprising. He sent 40 of his best soldiers, armored from head to toe, carrying heavy weapons designed to cut through bulkhead walls. They should have ended it in minutes. They did not end it. Tejo had prepared for them. He had rigged 2 corridors with improvised traps, overloaded power conduits that detonated when triggered, flooding the narrow hallways with electrical discharge. 12 guards went down before they fired a single shot. The rest retreated into a bottleneck where a team of humans hit them from above through ventilation shafts, dropping onto their backs, jamming stolen blades into the gaps in their armor. Jisoo led the non-fighters, the wounded, the children, the ones who could not fight. She guided them through the service tunnels toward the station's docking bay, following a route Tejo had mapped and memorized weeks ago. She was not a soldier. She was a medic, with soft hands and a sharp tongue, but she carried a pistol she had taken from a fallen guard. And when 2 HESC soldiers appeared in the tunnel ahead of her group, she used it. Twice. Her hands shook for a long time afterward. But she kept moving. She kept everyone moving. And Yuna fought her way up. She had left the arena covered in blood and barely able to walk. Jisoo had set her broken leg with a metal splint made from a piece of railing. Taeho had given her a set of shock rods taken from the first guards to fall. She moved through the station like something from a nightmare. She was slow because of her injuries. She was in pain that would have stopped any other creature. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Not now. Not when she could hear the sounds of fighting echoing through the walls. Not when she knew that every human on this station was bleeding for the chance she had given them. She reached Dovin's command level after 2 hours of fighting through checkpoints and guard posts. His personal guards were waiting. 6 elite Hesk warriors, the best of the best, hand-selected by Dovin himself. They were enormous, fast, heavily armed, and trained since birth to kill. They looked at the small, broken, blood-covered human limping toward them, and they felt something they had never felt before. They did not have a word for it in their language. Humans called it dread. Yuna killed 4 of them. Not easily, not quickly. She used the shock rods until they broke. Then she used the blade Taeho had made her. Then she used a piece of broken armor she pulled from one of the fallen guards. She took wounds that would have killed most species twice over. A deep cut across her shoulder, a stab wound in her thigh, a blow to the head that split her scalp and sent blood pouring into her eyes. She kept fighting. The remaining 2 guards broke and ran. She found Dovin in his command center. He was alone. His advisors had fled. His guards were gone. He stood in the center of the room, holding a ceremonial blade, a beautiful weapon made of dark metal, with symbols etched into the blade. It was ancient, handed down through his family for generations, meant for duels between warlords. He was calm. He was a warrior after all. He had been trained to fight since before he could walk. He was twice her size, faster than she expected, stronger than anything she had faced in the ring except Galrak. And he was skilled. The blade moved in his hands like an extension of his body, flowing from strike to strike with a grace that was almost beautiful. He cut Yuna across the ribs. He cut her across the arm. He drove her back across the room and put her on the floor twice. She got up twice. He put her down a 3rd time. She lay on the cold metal floor, bleeding from too many wounds to count. Her vision blurred, her body screaming at her to stay down, to stop, to let go. She thought of him sitting in the corner of the cargo hold, quiet and calm, saying, "They do not know what we are." She got up. Dovin saw her rise, and for the first time, something crossed his face that was not confidence. It was confusion. He had cut her. He had beaten her. He had broken her. And she was standing. Again. He did not understand. His species could not do this. No species he knew could do this. When the body was damaged, it stopped. That was the law of nature. That was how it worked. But humans did not follow that law. Humans were built by a cruel and patient evolution that valued survival above everything else. Their bodies could function through damage that would shut down any other nervous system in the galaxy. Pain did not stop them. It just told them they were still alive. Yuna closed the distance. Dovin swung the blade. She let it cut her. She let it open a long wound across her forearm as she reached inside his guard. She grabbed the blade with her bleeding hand, twisted it out of his grip, and drove it through the gap in his neck plating. Dovin fell. He hit the floor with a sound like thunder. He looked up at the humans standing over him and said nothing. There was nothing to say. He died with his eyes open. Taeho reached the command center minutes later. He stepped over Dovin's body, sat down at the main console, and opened every communication channel the station had. His message went out on every frequency, in every language the translation systems could handle, to every corner of the galaxy. This is the pit station. The warlord is dead. The pit circuit is over. To every human in chains, we are coming for you. To every species that put us in chains, hear this clearly. We are awake. Reclassify us. The Galactic Threat Index was updated within 4 days. A special session of the Interspecies Classification Board reviewed the footage from the pit station, the arena recordings, the combat data, and the reports from the uprising. The session lasted 2 hours. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was moved from Category 9, Minimal Threat, to Category 1, Apex Predator. Do not engage. The observer, the Velith anthropologist who had watched Una fight weeks earlier, was present at the session. When the vote was announced, she nodded once and wrote a single line in her journal. We should have read the signs. They were never fragile. They were patient. 3 days later, a stolen Hesk transport ship drifted through open space, heading toward the nearest human colony. The ship was battered and scarred, running on half power, held together by Teho's patchwork repairs and stubbornness. In the back compartments, freed humans slept on makeshift beds. Some of them smiled. Jisoo slept in the medical bay she had set up from stolen supplies. She slept deeply for the first time in months. Her hands, folded across her chest, were still. Teho sat in the pilot's chair, his eyes on the stars, his hands on the controls, guiding them home. And Una sat beside him. She was wrapped in bandages from her neck to her knees. Her left leg was in a brace. Her right arm was in a sling. Her face was swollen and cut and bruised in colors that should not exist on human skin. She looked like someone who should be dead. She looked like someone who had decided a long time ago that being dead was not an option. She stared through the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast dark between worlds, there were still humans in chains. On mining stations and slave ships and fighting pits she had never heard of. She thought of them. She closed her eyes and whispered, so quietly that only Teho could hear, "We are coming." Teho did not respond. He just adjusted their course and flew on. Behind them, the pit station drifted dark and silent in orbit, a dead monument to the mistake of underestimating the small, the soft, the breakable. And across the galaxy, in war rooms and council chambers and classified briefings, a new phrase entered the vocabulary of every intelligent species. Do not touch the humans. They called them fragile. They would never make that mistake again.